Three, two, one. Welcome to Sydney Reflect, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming, man. I really appreciate this. You're an ABC of a campus and you're here on our podcast. It means a great thing for us. Thank you very much again, Chris.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
All right, so let's get into it. Like, you are Associate Vice Chancellor of the Brisbane campus, Central Queensland University. I studied here in Sydney campus. So what does it look like being an Associate Vice Chancellor? You should be like really busy managing a lot of things in a day-to-day basis. What does it look like being an ABC?
Yeah, well, every day is different. I guess what it means, there's maybe two elements that you can split it into. The first is that you are the manager of this physical entity, which is a campus. And in our case, I'm the campus manager for Brisbane. So I look after our campus here, CQ University at 160 Ann Street in Brisbane. We occupy around 10 floors of a high-rise building. So it's a little of I guess an urban campus rather than a typical sprawling university campus. But that's part of my role. And you know, building management has lots of different ins and outs, as you would imagine. But ultimately, my role is also about being the ambassador for the university in this region of Southeast Queensland. So CQ University is a regional university. Our headquarters are in central Queensland. And so I'm in the southern part of Queensland in our capital city of Brisbane. And so I'm really the arms and legs and the voice of the university in this part of the world. And so that's a big responsibility. It means that I have to be the Vice Chancellor's envoy, I guess, in some regards. And I also have to be somebody who is actively putting our campus on the map and letting people know that the university is here and encouraging people to come and study with us or come and engage with us or come and participate in our research projects or just come and check out the campus. So my role is very functional, but at the same time, it's also very ambassadorial.
Okay. So, and how do you manage your time? You know, since you said you have so many things to do in a single day, like what's your process, like thinking process about I would manage the time for the day or for the week? How does it work for you?
Yeah, look, I am a pretty good time manager, but it's something that obviously comes with practice. Using an electronic diary obviously helps. I'm a big believer in making to-do lists. So every day or every week, I make a list of all the things I need to accomplish that day. It may be a very mundane task, or it may be a very important phone call, or it may be just something that I need to do in my personal life. But I will make those lists and very old school. I don't make them on paper so much anymore. I usually put them in the notes section of my iPhone, but I'm ticking them off all day as I go. And that helps me stay on track and stay focused. So starting the day with knowing what you need to accomplish and then finishing the day and having that satisfaction of hopefully having everything crossed off. But my role is twofold as well, because in addition to being the Associate Vice President here, I'm also the Director of Strategic Engagement for the university. And that involves looking after the day-to-day activities of the university's communications, philanthropy and alumni relations departments. And so I do have to divide my time between my Brisbane focused role and my whole of university focused role as well. So look, delegation is important as well. When you're working with a team, it's really important to know which tasks you need to take on yourself and which tasks you can delegate to people who work with you. That's a big way to manage time effectively. But look, it's different every day, and some days it's just about diving in and doing it and getting it done.
Yeah, I really like the idea of like making the list and ticking them off, because I do that and actually do that on a paper basis when I'm at home, but when I'm at work, it's basically electronic and digital. But I love that fact, like writing things down. These are the things I need to do. Okay, so these are the gap I have. Just fit it here. Do it like that. Although it's hard sometimes to do it exactly like that on a regular basis. Of course, you have to do that. But yeah, that's one of the ways I also try from time to time to manage my time.
And look, it feels tangible, if that makes sense. So when you can see it, when it's not on your screen, but it's actually there in front of you, and just that satisfaction of
taking
crossing through something, it's a really good feeling.
Yeah, true. And I can also see that you have worked, especially for like media relations, being a public relations officer, those kind of roles. So I just wanted to know about that. Like, how do you build those relations, be it with either students or be it with partners? How do you build those relations? What's the main thing that you have to become a media relations person?
Well, media relations is something that's evolving all the time. And what it looks like in 2021 or 2022 is very different to how it looked 10 years ago or even 20 years ago when I started. So my first entry into the workforce was as a journalist. I worked as a newspaper journalist. I also worked as an online journalist. And then eventually I transitioned into this world of media relations. And back then in the early 2000s, media relations was really about either helping journalists get a scoop on a story, or it was about protecting the organization you worked for from the media, if that makes sense. So making sure that the stories that ran about your company or your organization were as positive as possible. So it's a little bit of give and take, or at least it was. It was all about defending the reputation of your company in the media by being selective in terms of how you engage with the media. But it's also about promotion and pushing good news that will hopefully translate into positive media stories. So that's the old school model. I think what has changed in the present day is that with the advent of social media and with platforms like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, where any organization, any company, any person, and you're a good example, Bikesh, any person can be their own media company, right?
True.
So we don't need to wait for the Daily Telegraph or Channel 9 to put our stuff on display. We can do that ourselves. We can make really high quality videos for not a lot of money. We can publish photos, we can publish blogs, we can publish articles. We can distribute our own media releases or our own articles. And that has really changed the game, because you're no longer a corporate entity or a government department or a person dealing with the media. You are actually a media company that also happens to be a university, for example, in my case, dealing with the media. And so now it's less about being selective with the information you share with the media, and it's now more about being selective between the information that you share with the media and the information that you share through your own channels. So, as a university, we're also a publisher, we're also a TV station, we're also a radio station, and I'm embellishing a little bit, but ultimately we have these tools at our disposal. Every week we're producing podcasts, we're producing videos, we're producing long and short form videos, so stuff that you see in a Twitter feed or a Facebook feed that you scroll past really quickly, or longer form content that you'll consume on YouTube. We're producing media releases, articles, blog posts, opinion pieces. We're not quite in the TikTok sphere yet, but I doubt that it will be long before we're doing that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
So it's a funny thing. To my mind, it's less about media relations now, and it's more about how do you position yourself as a media company that also happens to be a university. And the balance used to be, 100% media relations. 20 years ago, that's what it was. The job was 100% media relations. Now, if you're a communications person in a university, it might be 50-50, it might be 80-20. It's a different game.
True, because of the new technology, as you said, everyone has a phone, everyone can make a video anytime and release it. So somehow it's much easier. But do you think because of that, somehow now it's much harder to reach the right kind of people or to grab the attention of the people? Whatever you're trying to say, you have to make it as short as possible. You need to deliver the message in short sentences as much as possible. So do you think that somehow is much harder now than before?
Yes, it is. And there's another factor that's made it very hard in the last 2 years, which is the sheer prevalence of COVID-19 related media coverage. So it used to be that the topics discussed in the media were relatively diverse. Now, COVID is
Everything's about it.
Of the newspaper, you know, and it's right through people's social feeds. It's really clogging the media landscape, and it's more difficult than ever to get cut through with stories that don't relate to the pandemic. Now that will change. You know, it's not going to be here forever, but that's been really interesting. But also what I've found as a result of COVID-19 and as a regional university, because my role is national, I deal with metropolitan media as well as regional media. We've seen actually a downsizing of regional media. So 3 years ago, pretty much every major town in Queensland had their own daily newspaper, multiple radio stations with their own announcers or newsreaders in that town, and TV stations with their own reporting team in those towns. What we've seen from 2020 onwards is actually a lot of those newspapers have gone online only. So from what used to be a daily print edition, it's now an online only publication. We've seen a lot of those offices shut down and journalists actually working from home without an office and the resources that go with that. We've seen TV stations take reporters out of some of those major towns and cities. And so what that means is we're losing outlets. So it's not just about getting cut through in the existing media landscape. It's also the media landscape itself is shrinking a little bit. Sometimes that's to do with cost consolidation and things like that. Certainly it's financial, but there are other elements as well. I think there's a view that if you can produce content centrally out of Brisbane or Sydney, then you can scale that content to sort of publish in regional outlets. I'm not really sure what all the mechanics are, but what it's meant is we have less outlets through which to publish, and that has pushed us more to become a media company unto ourselves.
And when you're like making like news, or when you're trying to like advertise university, like how do you make sure that, or how do you reach the right people, right students? How do you find the right students? Is there anything around that?
Yeah. So how do we target those audiences?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really good question. So when we talk about traditional media, so if we talk about newspapers or print media, we talk about radio, we talk about free-to-air television, those are very old school, tried and true mediums. And they don't necessarily appeal to the generation of students we're trying to reach. So if you are a 18-year-old who's just finished high school in year 12, or you are a student from overseas who has finished their undergraduate degree and looking to do a master's in Australia, for example, it's not going to be overly effective to target you through the newspaper or through free-to-air television. However, you will have influences in your life who still access that form of media. Might be your parents, might be your grandparents, might be your uncle, might be a mentor you have in the community, might be your teachers, might be the guidance officer at your local school. And so it's still important to have awareness of our product among that audience. I would consider that almost a secondary audience that has a strong influence on our primary audience. So we can't discount the importance of targeting the secondary audience. However, when we're talking about targeting students, it's really about social media engagement. And often what we'll do as a means of being very scalable in how we produce content is we might produce one piece of content that lives several times for several audiences. What I mean by that is we might write an article about a student success story, and it's a way of presenting a case study of a student who has studied at CU, who might serve as an example to other students who might want to come and study and walk a similar path. So that works for our student audience, that also works for our influencer audience. What we'll do with that story is we might publish it in the newspaper. we might also publish it to our Facebook feed, to our Instagram feed. We can use much of the same written content, the same photographic content. We might have some video content that goes with it. So it's just about repurposing the same content, but tweaking it slightly for those different audiences, for those different mediums, so that we can reach different audiences. So we have multiple audiences that we want to engage with. Students are only one of them, but typically students, the best form of engagement is through social media, because that's what their eyes are. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Because especially when you were talking about TikTok, from what I know, it's more about like the Gen Zs who have like been born after 2000s, and those people are the ones who are especially in TikTok, and they have a large audience. Like it's a big free audience, I guess, TikTok for now. That's why I guess everyone is into it. And sooner or later, even like universities or any other companies, I think they will have. Although right now it seems like, I wouldn't say it's like a child's thing, but it's more of like, it's not for like professional use yet somehow. For TikTok, it's just getting into there, like how Facebook and YouTube has already in there, like for the professional scenario and everything. It's not there yet, but it will be, I guess.
I think you need to be, look, I agree with you. And I think you need to be careful as a company or an organization in engaging with some of these mediums, because you can't just be, let me think of a really sort of old school conservative brand. Universities are pretty old school and conservative brands sometimes, but let's say I'm a supermarket, right? So I'm Coles, and I think about getting onto TikTok, and I don't know, maybe Coles has a TikTok account and it works well. I'm not sure, but I'm not singling them out. They were just the first brand that came to mind. But I'm a company that sells supermarket products to a mainstream consumer. If I'm going to be on TikTok, I need to be really clever that I'm not trying too hard to be cool. I'm not trying too hard to appeal to a 20-year-old or a 16-year-old. At the same time, I can't be so stuffy, if that's the word, that I don't appeal to anyone. So it's almost like if you're going to get onto a platform like that, I think you have to be yourself. And when I say be yourself, I'm talking about a brand. Like your brand has to be natural, has to be casual when you're on a platform like that. But you also have to be creating content that people actually want to engage with. If people are doing challenges on TikTok, and then we pop up in the feed with an ad for, come and study a Bachelor of Engineering, it's not appropriate for that platform. People won't want to engage with that content. You have to figure out what are the methods that people are using to make engaging content on that platform, and then kind of work backwards from there. Does my brand actually fit into this? I think that's a real challenge, some of these emerging platforms.
Yeah, it is true. As I said, TikTok is one of the best examples for that. But even with the Facebook, I remember the time, because I can see that in the generation gap between my parents and me, like how when I come back from Nepal, so like I didn't have like my personal mobile phone till I was in like high school, or even after that. So it's like, and as I was studying through my high school and my bachelor's, it was like we used to have phones and everything. And that's when we were into like Facebook and Instagram and everything. And our parents would avoid it as much as they can. It's like they never liked it. They never knew its importance or whatever. But now I can see that my parents are already in Facebook and they are like sharing photos and everything. And they are like asking me to comment and like we used to do before. So it's like it changes, with time, I guess.
Of course. Yeah, look, it absolutely does. And something that came past me recently in my capacity as Associate Vice President was I found out that there were some students that were unhappy about aspects of their course. And that happens from time to time, and that's fine. Students are effectively customers, and it's important to hear their concerns and make sure that we are addressing the concerns fairly and appropriately. So I certainly encourage students to let us know if they are not enjoying aspects of their course. But we had a group of students who were unhappy about aspects of their course. And I said, well, can you show me some evidence of what's been going on? And their response was, well, we have evidence because we've been talking in our Discord group. And I talk to some of, I'm not young, but I'm on the younger side, right? in the university environment. And I was talking to some of our sort of our teaching staff and our deans and people like that saying, hey, there's this Discord group, and everyone's like, well, what's Discord? So this is an emerging thing that people are using that isn't really known in the mainstream, but people under the age of 25 understand what it is. And so it's really, I guess not just as an educator or a university person, but in any walk of life, you don't have to be deeply involved with something like TikTok, but you kind of need to have a passing awareness that it exists, because if you don't stay alert to the evolving trends, particularly when you're running an organization that deals with young people as your primary customer group, you can get left behind. I think it's important to stay up to date with it all.
Yeah, true. And as we're going on and we're talking about students, like Brisbane campus has a lot of international students, right?
Yeah.
What's the ratio like between international and domestic?
Well, prior to COVID, it was around 40% international and 60% domestic. And obviously, once COVID hit, the Australian borders shut fairly quickly. So we didn't have that new intake of international students being physically on campus for the past 18 months or so. So that has changed the ratio a little bit. But in a typical year, it's around 60% Australian students, 40% international students. Our international students tend to study things like business, engineering, IT, accounting. But the Brisbane campus on the domestic side does specialise in a lot of allied health disciplines. So things like nursing and midwifery, which are not typically allied health, but that's part of the health sphere. Things like chiropractic science, things like medical imaging are very prominent on the Brisbane campus, and a lot of our Australian students choose that. And that's a little bit of a point of differentiation for us in the Brisbane market as well, because, Brisbane, like Sydney, it's a big city and it's got a lot of universities. And so we've specialised a little bit by offering some of those courses. It's a way of differentiating us from other universities and bringing students to the campus. And it's a nice diverse mix, actually. It's really nice to have a balance of international students and domestic students, even though they're not typically studying the same courses, although I believe we will be having more of an international intake into nursing next year. It's still great when we have social functions on campus, which we try to do quite regularly. You're seeing international and domestic students mixing and mingling, and that's a really great thing, I think.
Yeah, I think in Sydney campus, I think it's just the opposite. Like we should have like 60 to 70% of international students, and the rest is domestic. So it seems kind of different. Like if it would be great if, again, it depends on the students. If the students domestic students do not want to study the courses that international students are studying, it couldn't happen. But if somehow we were able to mix, we could keep both domestic and international students in the same class, I think international students would be able to somehow customize themselves here much easily, learn things much easily.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your experience like coming into an Australian campus for the first time?
The education system was weird for me first, because I had never done like an assessment or assignment like that before. I didn't know what referencing was and everything, but it was a good thing that we had ALC. That's where I learned everything, like APA referencing, how to write an essay and everything, That was great. But that's the thing. Somehow students who come here, they don't join orientation. First thing is, some of them, for others, even they join, they are actually not paying proper attention. I didn't do that personally myself. I learned everything myself later on than from the orientation itself. But people with the international students, what I can see is that they are not able to utilize those resources somehow, because they are so much busy with their study and work. Because for most of us, we have never done that before, Where I come from, our parents used to pay for everything. All we had to do was study. And when you come here and you have to do both of those things, it's very overwhelming for international students. And somehow because of that, they are not able to utilize those resources within the university.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I feel, because I worked as a change champion ambassador for the Sydney campus, and that's what I used to see among students. Like they aren't interested; they just want to get to class, finish that, pass it, go there, and just work.
Yeah, and you can understand that because it's a survival thing, right? Like you need to have that balance between earning a living and studying, and that's completely understandable.
Yeah, what do you think from your perspective, or what have you seen so far? If you have any stories like that, like what are some of the reasons or the difficulties that international students have?
Yeah, look, I think one of the difficulties, and I don't know if I'd say it's a difficulty, but it's something that seems to be a trend, and I think it actually relates to human nature, is that as humans, we tend to gravitate to people like ourselves because it's comfortable and it's sometimes convenient. And so for international students who come to our university or any university, you do sometimes see them sort of gravitate towards the people who have come from their home country, and you might have international students and domestic students in a class, or you might have students from Nepal in a class and students from India in a class, students from China in a class, students from Australia in a class, and they might actually just sort of stick to their own groups, which is totally all right, and it's totally consistent with human nature. But I think it's great if people can try and mingle with people who are different to them, because that's where you really learn about others and about yourself. And that's where you really get that sort of cultural richness out of the international student experience. But it takes time, and when you're in a new country and you're nervous, or you're not knowing what to expect, or you've got a bit of culture shock, it's completely natural to want to stay with people who talk like you and think like you and look like you, and I get that totally. So it's just about trying to find ways to creep out of your comfort zone, so eventually you feel quite natural in that diverse environment, I think.
That is true. That's something I've always suggested, like anyone or any newcomers who come here, like don't just stick to your group or to your culture. I mean, if you're here in Australia, if you wanted to do the same things you used to do back home, if you want to live with the same kind of people, same behavior, same mentality, like what's the use of being here? Like especially in a place like this where there are people from all around the world. It's not like if you go to like a US, there would be more US citizens and very less few people. Australia is a country like it's built up by people from different nations, different generations. So again, it's people like they are able to see that somehow, because they are so much like occupied with their daily lives and the financial troubles. But I would suggest anyone to, like to go out and learn that culture, experience, explore.
Yeah, and I think also if you are an international student and you have an interest in taking advantage of your post-study work rights, so just to explain for people who don't understand, as an international student in Australia, you can get a visa extension for several years after you finish your degree to continue and stay in Australia and work in your field and gain that international work experience. I think if you want to take full advantage of that as an international student, it is really important to have some level of cultural competency in how Australian workplaces work and how Australian managers think. And look, they're not all the same, but I think there are commonalities that are important to know. And, if you step into an office scenario as a person from Nepal or a person from India or a person from South America, it might on the surface look the same. There's tables, there's chairs, there's desks, there's computers, there's a kitchen, there's a bathroom, there's an elevator. It looks the same, right? People are wearing shirts and ties and dresses and things, but there are subtle cultural differences around people's expectations, around people's work ethic, in terms of people's flexibility, their attitude to work-life balance, their attitude to adhering to performance standards, their view about what time people walk in the door and what time people leave. their view about what constitutes a lunch break, their expectations of how you perform as an entry-level person or a person who's qualified with a master's degree relative to the rest of the workforce. You know, I'm picking up some silly examples, but these are actually all little jigsaw pieces that form the bigger picture of how a workplace is. And I can tell you right now, if I was to walk into, you know, I've actually never been to Nepal, but if I was to fly in right now, if the government would let me, if I could fly right now into Nepal and go to an office and try and do the same job, I might be really out of my depth.
It's a different culture, different system out there.
And that's not just about a language barrier, but there is a cultural barrier, and you have to figure that out. And I think, you know, for students from overseas who are studying in Australia, if they want to take full advantage of that Australian experience, particularly the work experience after they study, I think it's really important to try and engage with people who live here and who understand the culture. But I also think just to try and gain some work experience along the way as well. And if your university is offering like an internship program, and I know we do it at CQ University for international students, if you can take advantage of an internship program, if you can take advantage of some work integrated learning as part of your course, if you can get onto a student job site and find some work, I mean, I think it all really helps. And it all helps to form your fluency with the workplace over here.
True. It's also like you don't have to be in a particular office system to know the culture. Even if you're out there in a restaurant, you know, or in a packing company or wherever, if you're working with people like where the managers are from like a different culture, you know, it's a different style of work. It's a different style of, you know, how things go around, because I've worked in different spaces out here. Like I worked for the uni, I've worked in sales, I have worked being an assistant dental technician somehow. And now I'm actually getting into like an education consultancy, back into education. So different workplaces have different systems, different expectations, different ways of working. So it's always good to understand that and experience that.
Absolutely. I'm really curious to hear about your dental assistant work. That's I just went to the dentist yesterday. I'm still feeling scarred from it.
So I actually used to work as a dental technician. So I wasn't in the dentist office, but more over like where we used to build teeth and the night guards and mouth guards. I was in that place, like in the lab of the dental space. But yeah, I went in there because I needed a job. They had a vacancy. I went in, had a chat. I used to work as a cleaner in that company. So I used to talk to them. I used to know them since like more than a year or so. So I already knew them. So they had a vacancy, like it was a simple junior position. And during COVID times, it was like in October last year. So I just joined in, and yeah, it was fun. It was a completely different experience. I had never expected in my life that I would be doing that. You know, but it was somehow fun because you had to like cut things with the scalpels and, you know, detail work. So it was kind of like fun, you know, like artistic.
Yeah. And that's a really good lesson in itself, because you were willing to take on a job that was sort of very different from what you ended up doing. Now you're doing cleaning.
You needed to have like
know where it goes, right?
You had to have like a proper study to get into that job. I had no study, you know, like I had no experience, no theory at all. And it was kind of uncomfortable at the beginning, but I got used to it and it was fun. It was new experience, you know, like new work culture, you know, new things. And I like to do that, like explore, grab every opportunity you have, because there's always something to learn from all of them.
That's excellent. I love it.
Yeah. Coming back to the workspace and working as students, this is something that I felt like recently for a year or so. Like, you know how international students are restricted to work only 40 hours fortnight. Is that what do you think? Is that one of the reasons why the students are being exploited at work? Because because of that limitations, international students tend to end up doing cash jobs instead of tax jobs, you know, and that's where they are getting more exploited from what I can see. What do you think about that? Is that limitation one of the reasons for the exploitation that we can see around with international students?
Look, it may be. I mean, if we really unpack that issue, I believe that the reason for the 40-hour limit is to ensure that when international students come to Australia, they are able to dedicate sufficient time to their studies. You know, if you're working full-time, and I've worked full-time and studied a master's degree myself, it's a really difficult juggle. So if you're coming here and you're working more than 20 hours a week, you might find it difficult to maintain, you know, your academic work. However, it is important that you can survive financially as a student here. And depending on the rate of income that you're receiving compared to your expenses, if 20 hours isn't enough, then you might feel a struggle there in terms of saying, well, this is how much is coming in, this is how much is going out. If those scales don't balance, you know, I can understand that people feel insecure in those situations. So yes, it may push some students to seek to color outside the lines a little bit in terms of where they're finding work. But I think it is really important at the same time that we as a university sector and also we as a society try and stamp out that exploitation, because what the exploitation means is that if students are getting paid cash under the table, they are potentially not getting paid award wages or minimum wage, which means they are getting less for their time. So, you know, you may need to work 30 hours cash in hand to make the same amount that you'd be earning legally in 20 hours, right?
Exactly.
So it's, you know, look, it's a difficult balance, a lot of moving parts, and I understand that students may be frustrated that they need more income, but we really have to stop the exploitation, and we have to ensure students have enough time to study in their week. So I don't know what the perfect answer is. I think,
neither do I.
I think, you know, if we are stuck with that rigid 40-hour fortnight rule, then we need to ensure that as many international students as possible are getting into roles where they're going to be paid appropriately so that they have enough money to survive while they're here. I think it's interesting, like I think at the moment, and certainly after COVID, or I know we're still in COVID, but after COVID, we actually saw a really upward trend in the job market in Australia. And a lot of professional jobs and higher paid jobs have vacancies now. And so it means that people who have traditionally done hospitality work or factory work or warehouse work or whatever, like they might be going this way. And so there's more vacancies in that bracket as well. So I actually think there's not necessarily a shortage of work at the moment, which is great. And hopefully it means more international students can take advantage of that when they arrive back on shore. But it's a complicated area.
It is, right? It is. It's hard to explain, and it's hard to like say this is the right answer for this, because it depends on a lot of factors. And again, different students are different. So what I'm saying, I might be saying from the perspective of what I've seen around my culture. Someone from a different country might have a different experience, you know. And when we're talking to this space about troubles as international students, what do you think about the mental health problems with the international students? What can you see? What is happening? What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, for everybody, including international students, mental health is so critical. Mental wellness is so critical. And one of my past roles in the university sector has been as a director of student services. And so that includes counseling and mental health support. So I've seen it all firsthand, and I've actually seen, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of the whole range of problems or issues that students are facing on that front. And I've seen some things that are really heartbreaking. But what I would say is that there's a few things that students need to overcome, particularly for international students when they come to Australia. I know that homesickness is often a big factor.
It is.
And I guess loneliness, coupled with homesickness is a bad recipe.
Very much.
So as much as I said before, it's important to mingle and meet diverse groups of people and try and embed yourself with Australian culture as much as you can. I think at the same time, it is important to connect with your own culture because that can help to fight the homesickness.
Yeah.
So very lucky in this day and age, we can give mum a Zoom call or a FaceTime call or something, and that's much easier than it's ever been before. But also, if you're living in Sydney, find your favorite Nepalese restaurant or your favorite Thai restaurant or your favorite Indian restaurant and go and connect with your culture in that way, just as a little piece of home while you're sort of dealing with that homesickness issue. I think the other thing that I see is when students come from overseas to Australia, often there are, I think on the whole, and I hope this is your experience as well, I think on the whole, Australia is a very welcoming place, it's a very friendly place, hopefully a very safe place. But there are some elements of cultures that don't align. So sometimes when students come from Southeast Asia or they come from the Middle East, there are elements of our culture here in terms of things that we find acceptable that maybe aren't as acceptable back home. And so as you are a young person in the world, enjoying, studying at university, but also enjoying yourself, maybe going out with friends, going out to bars or clubs or whatever, or just interacting with people, you're constantly coming up against these situations where your cultural values don't necessarily align with the cultural values you're experiencing. And I've seen that translate into some mental health issues as well. And it's hard to explain that without going into specific examples, which I probably don't want to do. But, I think it's important just to have an open mind about dealing with those cultural differences and making sure that you feel respected and that you are holding true to your values, but understanding that you're in a different country and there could be things that don't align with your value system or belief system that you have to just kind of understand how they operate and so that's another point. But
it's hard for people to understand that. I have also seen that a lot. I don't know if it actually led to mental health issues or not, but you can see people out there whose views and possibility would be completely different. Even with, let's say, basic example of eating beef. In our culture, it's like a sin to eat beef.
Yeah.
And you can find beef everywhere in every shop there. So it's okay if you don't want it, don't eat it. But you shouldn't be uncomfortable about someone else eating it, because that's their culture, that's their part of things. So somehow we need to be open-minded. We have to be acceptable for what others are doing. If it's affecting your life, maybe you should change a few things here and there, but if it's not affecting your life, you need to respect that and get the respect back to. If someone is not respecting, you should be able to speak up against that, or whatever is needed. But it's a different culture.
I remember going to China once with a group, and one of the people in the group was a Muslim, and he only ate halal.
Yep.
And so he, in China, there's a lot of meat in everything. There's a lot of pork in a lot of dishes and things like that. So he found himself just eating vegetarian everywhere he went. He didn't want to risk it. Just give me the bok choy, or give me the noodles or something. Don't give me any meat. And I remember after a couple of weeks in China, we actually stumbled across this halal restaurant, and he was like, he was so happy. He ordered every meat dish on the menu. But that's life in a different country, I guess.
And we
circling back, I think, for your mental health, it's really important that you are not isolating yourself, that you are making friends, trying to make friends, trying to get involved in things. Because I think, obviously if you're studying 20 hours a week and working 20 hours a week, it doesn't leave a lot of time for everything else. But if you can try and stay busy, stay involved in things, it's really good for your mental health.
Yeah.
Just eat well, exercise well, be active. It all helps. It all really helps.
Yes, true. It's true because the thing, loneliness and isolation, you're already here away from your family and everything. There's already homesickness. And when the loneliness hits in, like it's a very bad recipe, as you said before, because I've been through that. I've experienced that. I had to go to a counselor here and work through all of that. But yeah, somehow nobody tells you that you could go through this, when you come here in pre-departure or post-departure, like I don't think most people will say this. They will see a lot of things, but not many people will talk about mental health. That's why I like to talk about it, have more dialogues and leads to more people about this, because this is something that actually leads to death of a lot of people. It's like a serious thing out there,
Yeah, it's super serious. It's great that you talk about it, because if we keep it under wraps, nothing changes.
Nothing changes. So you need to have dialogues. At least when people share their stories, or when people tell that someone else have been through that, when they hear it, somehow they feel relatable to that, and they can feel like they are not the only one there who is having that, or they would somehow know that there is help available. We can go out and get that. So I always like to talk about this, and thank you very much for your perspective. It's about, again, up to now, whatever you have said, it's really good. Like I have been getting like a different perspective from your angle on all of these topics. So it's really nice right now. So I wanted to change a bit of a topic and talk more about like innovation and entrepreneurship, in higher education or in universities, because that is something I hadn't found or I hadn't seen back in my country while I was doing my bachelor's in civil engineering. And when I came in here to do my master's, I could see that there were a lot of topics or subjects where we were talking a lot about innovation. Although I was studying the similar kind of a subject, which was Master of Management for Engineers, which it's basically like a business course plus engineering mixed up together. That is very confusing course for a lot of international students, if you don't know that, because somehow they come in expecting that it's like a pure engineering management course, but it's kind of different. So I've heard a lot about that too. But yeah, there's a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation, and that's fun. Like social innovation, even in solving social issues, we're trying to bring in innovation there, So what's your take on that? Why do we need innovation and entrepreneurship, do you think? I think in higher education, in one form or the other,
Yeah, well, I mean, I would probably take a more extreme view to say, I don't actually know if we do it enough in higher education, because the world is moving so rapidly that it is very difficult for curriculum to keep pace with, so the curriculum content to keep pace with what is actually happening out there. And, curriculum has to be based on literature, it has to be evidence-based, it has to be kind of verified, if you want to say that. And I understand the need to be rigorous about that, so that when we're teaching students, we're teaching them stuff that is legitimate. But there is such a fast-moving trend out there, and you just have to look at, I mean, we were talking about TikTok before, but you just have to look at things like cryptocurrency and decentralized finance and things like that are increasingly becoming part of the business world. You're looking at things like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality. You're looking at even in like engineering, it might be just the development of new materials, new construction materials, new compounds that, do things that we never dreamed possible before. So I think it's important that our curriculum keeps a good balance of teaching the basics, teaching the fundamentals, as well as having one foot in the future and teaching about innovation. But in terms of entrepreneurship, why that's interesting, why that's important, I think increasingly we're seeing students, particularly younger students, almost rebelling. I don't know if rebelling is the right word, but it's the best word I can think of right now. Almost rebelling against the notion of doing what mum and dad did, which was get a job for somebody else, work in that company for 20 years and get another job and work in that company for 20 years and then retire. That's not as appealing to younger people today. Younger people today have their own vision of what they want to do with their life, and increasingly that's about being entrepreneurial. And it's not always just the typical, hey, I want to start a tech startup and I want to make it a unicorn or something. I mean, some want to do that.
Anything is possible.
Yeah, anything is possible. That's right. But but there are others who say, well, I want to do like a creative venture, or I want to do something with multimedia, or I want to I don't want to work for an engineering firm. I want to start my own engineering firm. And I don't know. I'm just making up examples, but I think if you're teaching the basics of entrepreneurship to students, then at least if they don't want to go the traditional route of working for somebody else, if they want to be job creators rather than job takers, then they do need some of those tools to sort of get into that line of work. Personally, what I've seen is some of the best entrepreneurs actually go to university, graduate, work in industry, and then segue out of industry into their own venture. Because sometimes you need to see what's broken about the workforce in order to have those creative ideas that translate into business opportunities. So I wouldn't dissuade students from seeking a traditional path, because they might actually find that it brings them to a non-traditional path of being an entrepreneur. But everyone's pathway is different. I think universities can do more around equipping students with actual kind of like, it's one thing to teach entrepreneurship, it's another thing to take students who have a good idea and help them develop it into a business that might then be launched. And I think if universities can be the incubator for that kind of activity increasingly, that would be great. And some universities are doing that really well, but not all. So I certainly would encourage more of that. But look, I think it's great to have the focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. It can't be to the detriment of the fundamental teaching activity, but I think it's really important to bring it into the mix.
True. As you were saying, like with the young generation, I can already see, and I've talked about this in this podcast before too, like how most of us in our generation who is coming, for now, I can see, like, I actually recently met a 10-year-old girl. Like, she's 10 years old, and I can talk to her like I'm talking to you, like she knows everything, like she knows about mental health, she knows about wars and politics and, like you negative and positive human emotions. Looking at the kids these days, they know so much, like compared to me, myself. And our generation, I can see, is that they don't want to do that traditional 9-to-5 job. Most of them, some of them love it, and it's a very good idea to do that in a sense, like you work 9-to-5, you have a proper income, you have a happy life, you have a happy family. That's good. But I don't know. The thing I'm afraid about is that I don't want it to be like a trend or a fashion where everyone is like, I need to be an entrepreneur, although your mindset is an entrepreneur, although your lifestyle and culture is an entrepreneur. But I'm afraid that it wouldn't turn into a fashion or a trend like that. But every one of us, most of us, I can see that, we want to be entrepreneurs. We want to do something different. And this is a talk I have with my dad too, like how he's always saying traditional things, get a job. And I'm like, I'm not that bad. I'm not built that way.
I think that's an important point though, is that it can veer into being trendy, and it's important that if people sign up for entrepreneurship, they understand that it's not all about private jets and posing for Instagram. It is actually about, there's hard work involved.
Very much.
And there's collaboration involved. And if you really are building a large business, you've got to be involved with fundraising and corporate governance, like building a board. And like, it's not just all about popping bottles and driving around in nice cars. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So yeah, hopefully if more people are exposed to it, then those who are just seeking to cash in on a trend can sort of sift out of it, and those who are really interested can kind of stay the distance and continue. But yeah, I think the social media view of what an entrepreneur is maybe different from the reality.
Yeah, it's different from the reality. Like, people only see the success, they never see the hard work, the build up, whatever has been there.
Well, there's a good quote I heard once, and it kind of relates to mental health as well, because sometimes looking at Instagram can be bad for your mental health. You see all these people who have perceived success, and you're like, oh, why don't I have the Lamborghini? Why don't I have the model girlfriend, or whatever it might be? But social media is a highlight reel.
Mm.
It's not behind the scenes.
No.
So, you know, if you think about your life and you talk about the highlight reel, hey, you can talk about, hey, I run a podcast and hey, I do this, but people don't see you washing the dishes or,
Exactly.
you know, taking the dog out for a walk or something. That's the behind the scenes, and don't get too caught up in other people's highlight reel, because we've all got a highlight reel and we've all got a behind the scenes, and the behind the scenes is never that glamorous.
Yeah. When you talked about that, I just remember this quote saying, I don't know where I got it from, but it goes like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah,
You know,
I like
so
that saying.
like every one of us are at our own pace, at our own life. You know, when you start comparing to others like that, and I think Instagram, as you said, social media has caused that a lot, especially in young teenagers, because I again got this from a movie. We actually played it in our social innovation like events too, where they were showing like what are the impacts of social media, what can happen, especially to the young children right now, you know, because they're on the phones all the time. You know, they are not out there seeing the real world, or they cannot figure out somehow what is right or what is wrong. At least with our age, since we have seen both media and without media, we can somehow figure out, okay, this is bullshit, this is not the right thing, this couldn't be true, or we would at least do some research to figure it out. But we know with the young generation, look at what are the takes in flat earth. You know, because do you believe in flat earth or not?
Oh, do I believe in flat earth? No.
Okay. I can see a lot of people around like in social media who talk a lot about flat earth theories, you know, and they have like real proofs to prove them that this is true. Like they have like scientific proofs and everything. Somehow they just collect whatever they want and make their own research to give a result, you know. So things like that, we should be careful, especially with the kids, you know, because they would believe that's the truth.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there is misinformation, and then there is difference of opinion. And difference of opinion is good, I think, because it promotes healthy discussion. Misinformation is something else, and it's a very fine line sometimes between the two. So I think probably the social media companies need to get better at policing some of these things. But yeah, I love that quote. Comparison is the thief of joy. I've heard that before, and I think it's a really important quote.
Yeah, because even here with us right now, especially with the students, I can see it even with my friends. Like some of them are already a permanent resident, and some are still studying, and they are like comparing with them and thinking that they haven't done anything, and it leads to one thing to another, and they start getting, you know, more and more depressed somehow. Not depression would be in the word, but, you know, getting sad, upset, and finally leading to depression, you know.
Yes.
So we should be careful about that.
Yeah, you know, my wife always says this to our children, that, you know, when they're in a race, running race, swimming race, something like that, you're actually only competing with yourself. You don't need to worry about the competition, because you know whether you've done your best or not. So it's actually about competing with yourself, trying to be better than you were last time. Don't worry about the guy in lane 2 or lane 3, because they're competing against themselves too, you know, and we're all good at different things. So you've just got to use yourself as motivation rather than looking over your shoulder about what the competition's doing. I mean, it's important sometimes. You got to know where you stand, but ultimately you are only competing against yourself.
Since you talk about motivation, what would be some of the ways you would say, like, how do you motivate yourself basically?
I'm a pretty routine person, so I like to wake up in the morning and exercise, and I like to get up early. I like to get up about 5 a.m. I like to exercise, and I find just getting that rush of blood and sweating a little bit, it's a really good start to the day. It starts the day off with a positive mindset. I like to listen to podcasts, and I like to listen to all sorts of podcasts, but first thing in the morning, I like to listen to something with a really positive message. So it might be someone doing like a motivational speech, or even something a bit more spiritual, just to kind of put me in the right mind frame for the day. And then I guess that's a good way to start the motivation. But Look, I mean, I don't have too many like techniques and tips.
You are a motivated person naturally.
I like to do good work, and I like to try and be a kind person. Try and be a person who keeps their word. Try and be a person who does what they promise they're going to do, and those sorts of things, like holding yourself to a certain standard. I guess that's motivation in itself, because it's very easy for me to look at my to-do list and say, I've got 50 things on here today, and you know what, I'm not going to do them. I'm going to the pub, or I'm going home.
Do you have those kind of feelings? Or not at all?
Look, do you know what? It's December 2021. So after a very long and challenging year, I think at the moment it's very tempting to go, get me out of here. We're all big, right? We're all like, at the end of our rope, and I think, very tempting to go home and watch Disney Plus on the couch with popcorn or something. But no, look, I tend not to have those feelings too often. I guess I just like to hold myself to a certain standard. I know what my values are, and if I can sustain myself at those values, then that's kind of keeps me going.
True, good to know that, because that's something that I have a lot of trouble regarding. Like, I am good at motivating myself, but there are days where I'm like, nah, I can't do that. So I just wanted to know, like, how do you like motivate yourself to get rid of like those feelings and keep pushing forward and like going forward?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think my challenge is not motivation per se. I am quite a motivated person. I'm an action-oriented person. My challenges maybe, are more around self-doubt. Sometimes you come across a challenge and just say, oh, I'm not sure I'm cut out for that. I'm not sure I can do that. And so my challenge is to motivate myself to tell myself that I can achieve these things, or I can at least give these things a go and do these things. So it's so actually, funnily enough, the other day, sometimes I write like a little message to myself on a post-it note, and I put it on my computer screen. And I wrote this one the other day because it just popped into my head, but it was so good. It just said, what's the worst that could happen? So I just put it there. And now anytime I encounter like a difficult situation, like I have to make a difficult phone call, or I have to take part in something that I don't feel I'm well equipped to do, I just kind of look at that thing that says, what's the worst that could happen? And it makes me reflect on going, am I going to die? Am I going to lose a limb? Am I going to fall off a cliff? No, probably none of those things. The worst that can happen is maybe my pride is hurt a little bit, or my ego is hurt a little bit. Is that really that bad? Not really. So let's just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. That's a good way to think about it. And that's a good note to end this podcast on. Thank you very much, Chris, for coming here. Do you have anything to say for any of my listeners, our international students, mostly are the listeners of this podcast right now? So anything you want to talk about further or anything?
Thanks, Bikesh. No, I think I've said all I wanted to say, but I guess to your listeners and to any international students out there, I really congratulate you on what you're doing, because you've made that difficult step of crossing the oceans to be here for the betterment of your life and the betterment of your career. And that's a really noble thing. That's a really exciting thing to pursue. So just keep going, stay motivated, stay mentally healthy, and if you need me, you can reach out to me if you want some advice. Bikesh, you have my LinkedIn. You can probably link me when you publish this podcast.
I'll put it in the link description.
I'm always keen to give people advice or support. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But thank you very much for having me. It's been really fun to chat.
Thank you very much for coming, Chris. I mean, with you, whatever you're doing with that time, you actually took out time for us. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
Have a good one. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. If you like this video, hit subscribe. You can listen to the full podcast in YouTube, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.